So you want to expand your comfort zone and improve your skill level when it comes to art. Experimenting is the best way to go about that, so you found the right video. Hi, I'm Librho, I'm a freelance artist, and I'm going to explain to you all the different ways I can think of off the top of my head that you can experiment in your art. And I've used all of these experiments myself to get to where I am today. Normally I jump straight into the how-to part of the video and the advice, but I'm going to open this up by telling you why you should experiment. In case you're not sold already by the fact you're watching this video, if you are, you can skip to this timestamp. So straight off the bat, absolutely anyone can experiment. If you've been drawing in the same style and at the same level for 10 plus years and you're a complete expert in the field you're in, you can still experiment. And if you're a beginner who literally picked up a pencil yesterday, you can also experiment. In fact, whether or not you realize it as a beginner, you experiment the most, and it's how you will start your art journey. There's a lot of stepping stones, which each experiment basically is, that you need to get to before you get to your final destination, I guess you can call it. Although I think saying checkpoint is probably better, because even if you're an expert at your final destination, there's still stepping stones after that to get to another destination. As an expert, you might feel your art has become stagnant, which is where experimenting is going to help increase your enjoyment for it again, maybe spark some more passion. And as a beginner, you have a lot less history to look back on to know what you do and don't like. So that's what experimenting is all about. It's trying everything and then choosing what you like the most. Whatever end of the spectrum you are at, it's really beneficial for expanding your knowledge and expanding your creativity. Experiments can really help you break free of your progress plateau and keep art feeling fresh and enjoyable, so you aren't, like I said, going stagnant. And the way it expands your knowledge and creativity is by chucking a new problem at your supercomputer of a brain that then you have to problem solve around, and it's possibly a new problem you've not faced before, which opens up new pathways in your brain that you now have access to as knowledge. And that also builds up your creative side, because you're thinking more creatively, more out of the box, how to problem solve these new problems. You're working on your imagination without actively pushing something out of your brain in image form. But by experimenting with art and art tools in your process, you will have your art brain still in gear, so you can transfer it a lot easier to your paintings, drawings, sculptures, whatever you make. Okay, I think if you weren't sold, you are now, so let's get straight into the first way you can experiment, and it's going to be the easiest. Experiment within your process. So if you're someone who already has a process, this is your safest and easiest option. If you're not, don't worry, there are going to be other ways you can experiment. But for now, I'm going to tell you how to experiment with your process. So this could be as easy as changing the brush you use, but keeping your process entirely the same, so you have to figure out new ways to make this brush work with you. Or you could go the even easier route by just timing yourself, making it a bit more of a challenge of speed. In a way, experiments are challenges, and challenges are the best way to improve, because you're setting yourself micro goals that are fairly easy to reach, like timed challenges, drawing every day for a week, trying out a new color palette out of your comfort zone, or maybe you're going to skip a step in your process. That's a really scary thing you can change and experiment with, while still keeping your process relatively the same. But let's say you skip out the last hour of rendering, or you skip out the sketching phase, or the thumbnail phase, or the color blocking phase, and just go straight into something. Those are all ways that you can challenge and experiment whilst keeping your process relatively the same. And while you might not pick any extravagant new techniques up, you will find yourself improving in some way. May that be speed, or you've become a bit less of a perfectionist, or you've found a new brush you adore and it's kind of changed your style but you can't really tell how. Either way, you've learned something new, I hope, while still having the safety net of what you already know. And remember setting little experiments and challenges up with the goals in mind of just finishing something or getting started or trying something new, and not worrying about what you actually create. That's going to build a lot of positive reinforcement around yourself and art. And remember, positive reinforcement, making yourself enjoy something, is a great way of building a habit, of building something that you want to come back to later. So continuing to come back to something you enjoy will keep you consistent, and that is the best way you can improve. Okay, I think you're ready to be pushed into the deep end with this experiment. Experiment with mediums. At face value, that doesn't seem that scary, especially because you're probably a creative watching this, and most creatives typically like creation generally, so they've dabbled in almost every medium. So I guess what I'm trying to say is this one goes out to the beginners, because it's the same hobby, just in a different genre. Reading is reading, art is art, but reading a horror book is not going to be the same as reading a romance book. That goes the same for using oils, for example, versus clay. It might be a costly experiment, so definitely go into this with some research. Go watch a bunch of other artists use a bunch of different mediums first. Definitely do go try out some different mediums though. Honestly, I know I said this one was for beginners, but if you are an expert who has been using the same medium for 10 plus years, go ahead and try something new, because you're going to have all that creative thinking still there, but you might find yourself back at square one, which might inspire a whole nother journey. Or you might just be derailed for a bit before eventually going home, and that is fine because I'm sure you'll still bring something new back, or you'll find a new sense of self within your medium that you didn't appreciate so much before. I'm not sure what mediums you have been exposed to, so I'm just going to quickly list off a bunch before we move on to the next experiment. Oil paints, watercolor paints, sculptures with clay, air dry or oven, or you may even find a kiln. Pottery is really cool. Pencil art, oil pastels, digital art, digital sculpting, that's really cool. Embroidery, beadwork, and even writing, I would say, are all valid art forms in my opinion. Gouache and acrylic and charcoal and powdered graphite. Yeah, you don't have to use pencils. You could ground the lead up and use a paintbrush. I'm sure I'm missing some, but that is enough mediums for now. Let's move on to the next experiment. Experiment with your subject. While you can sort of keep a similar process for this, you might not have painted enough animals or buildings or people or landscapes or backgrounds generally to have a solid process for them when you do draw them in your own style or medium. So that's why they've got their own little section. Because you might find yourself sticking to a subject when trying to find your style. It's advice I have given in my Finding a Style video. You're completely right to do that. At the beginning though, when you need that extra consistency, eventually you will need to experiment and build these areas up in your art so you can maybe draw everything eventually. Of course you don't have to, I still don't draw people. And at this point it is a personal decision. I might get there eventually, but for now I'm enjoying the dragons and cats and landscapes I currently do. But figuring out how to draw buildings leveled my art up, I would say. It was an experimental process. I did do some artist copy studies for this. And I learned a lot more about perspective and using straight lines in my art because I often avoided them in favour of things like trees that are very wiggly. When doing these, I'd recommend going into them, doing one-to-one reference style experiments, because the hard work translating reference into simpler shapes has already been done by the other artist you're studying. It just saves you an extra step so that you can focus purely on consuming and developing this new area. I would honestly recommend this form of experimenting to maybe beginner to intermediate artists that have shoehorned themselves a bit into drawing the same subject. I get it completely. It's really good to have a safe subject. I have been there. I drew dogs for like 4 months straight once. But if you're feeling like you need change, the easiest thing you can do is go from drawing dogs to having a go at drawing a cat or something. It can be that simple. I'm not asking you to go from drawing a dog portrait to doing a full Mona Lisa with background. Don't worry. I'm going to move on to my next experiment, and it's probably one you're already aware of. Experiment with your style. You absolutely do not need to have a style already to do this, and you don't need to have a style full stop if you don't want to. But getting inside another artist's head and really figuring out their process and their specific style can be a really fun experiment. Not that you have to get into another artist's head to do style experiments. You can just have a go at doing something abstract without a specific artist in mind, or you can dabble into realism and just go full blast with your rendering. However you want to experiment with your style is perfectly okay. I'm glad you're getting art done. So if you want to experiment with your style by being more abstract, set yourself a challenge of using as few strokes as possible, or do some random squiggles on the page and then draw on top of that what you can pick out from them. Both of those are actually really fun exercises I would recommend to anyone because they really develop your creativity and get you looking at things and details in a different way. As for going more realistic with your style, you may need to do some more research and look at more tutorials for this. Or like I said, get something started, put on a rendering tutorial video and just go absolutely wham with your rendering. Spend hours on it. Go for it. I did also mention artist copy studies. I have a whole video about those that I'm not going to fit into this little section here, so go watch that if you want to hear more in depth about them and also watch me do my own. So basically artist copy studies are where you are really inspired by another artist's work and you try to make a direct copy of one of their pieces, mimicking their style or process as close as possible. Of course, don't then go past this work off as 100% your own. Credit the fact that it's a study, please. And if you want to take it a step further and solidify what you learned, have a go at drawing your own thing from either a reference or your head in their same process or style. And these are so beneficial because the artist you're copying essentially has already done the hard work translating a reference into something a lot easier consumed. Depending on the artist you're studying, you can oftentimes see their brush strokes and they might even have step-by-step videos up of them drawing the piece. That's about all I have time to say about artist copy studies. Definitely go watch my other video if you're still intrigued. So go and experiment, push your comfort zone and expand your creative thinking to problem solve for your new situations. And return to your comfort zone when you're ready. Has anything changed when you get back there? Don't be afraid to leave it again, and I'll see you next week.